Let's get it started in here. And the bass keeps running, running, and 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 running, running.
In this context, there's no disrespect. So in a verse for rhyme, you break your necks. We get 5 minutes for rest to disconnect. Roll wall, like elect. So losing inhibition, follow your intuition. 3 minutes of a breakaway from tradition. Cause women be out, good as full of winner. You and them believe how we wow people out. Turn it till it's burning out, turn it till it's turning out. Back door, northwest, east, south.
Everybody, everybody, let's get into it. Let's get it stupid. Let's get it started. 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 Lose control of body and soul. Don't move too fast, people. Just take it slow. Don't get ahead. Just jump into it. Y'all hear about it? The ass will do it. Get started. Get stupid. Don't move too fast, people. Will walk you through it step by step like an infant new kid. Inch by inch with a new solution. Transmit hits with no delusion. The fear's irresistible and that's how we move it. Everybody, let's get into it. Let's get it stupid. Let's get it started. 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 And the bass keeps running, running, and running, running, and running, running, and running. Let's just get to talking in here. 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 Let's get started 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 in here. Yeah, 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 bow.
Thanks everyone to Eric. Thank you again for having us. That first song was Let's Get It Started by the Black Eyed Peas. This next song is called Animal. It's by the Neon Trees. Oh, that right.
What are you waiting Here we go again. I kinda wanna be more than friends. So take it easy on me. I'm afraid you're never satisfied. Here we are again. Forsake like animals and play pretend. You're just a cannibal and I'm afraid I won't get out. I won't spend time. Oh, I want some more. What are you waiting for? Take a bite of my heart tonight. Oh, I want some more. What are you waiting for? What are you waiting for? Take a bite of my heart tonight. Here we are again. I feel the chemicals sinking in. They're getting heavier. I wanna run and hide. I wanna run and hide. I do this every time. You're killing me now. And I will be denied by you. The animal inside you. Whoa, I want some more. What are you waiting for? Take a bite of my heart tonight. Oh,
evening. It's called Up a Ladder to the Roof.
Shall run across the sky, illuminate the night. Whoa, I will try and guide you to better times and brighter days. Hey, go up the ladder to the roof where we can see heaven much better. Go up the ladder to the roof where we can be closer to heaven. Stay with me, and we shall let expression ring with freedom in our singing. Whoa, memories of broken dreams. Oh, don't you know? They'll all fade away. Hey, go up the ladder to the roof where we can see heaven much better. Go up the ladder to the roof where we can be closer to heaven. Relax and I'll tell you a story of love, happiness and the happiness in it, baby. We'll combine our thoughts and together we'll travel to the fountain of loveliness. I'll never, never, ever leave you alone to wander, honey. We can stay together and live with love. So much stronger, so much stronger. Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? Don't you wanna go? Oh, don't you wanna go up the ladder to the roof where we can see heaven much better? Go up the ladder to the roof where we can be closer to heaven. Hey, go up the ladder to heaven. Hey, heaven, up the ladder to heaven. Up the ladder to heaven.
Would everybody please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance Thank you. Please be seated. Hey everybody. My name is Austin Brown, and I'm a student volunteer for Hillary here at Dartmouth. I want to take a few moments to tell you all about why I support this candidate and why I believe it is so incredibly important for you all to get involved in this election. I come from a family that understands the gravity of civic engagement. 51 years ago, the Ku Klux Klan murdered my father's cousin, Andy, at the age of 20. Andy had traveled to rural Mississippi as a young college student, joining hundreds of volunteers in rural Mississippi to register African Americans to vote during a time when our democracy was not so democratic. I stand with Hillary because she has been a voice for those who need a champion throughout her 30 years in public service. When facing big fights on the local, national, and global stage, Hillary does not stand down. Instead, she has the tenacity and determination to stand up for what's right and deliver results. Our country has taken some tremendous steps forward in the last 7 years, but we now face the question of whether we're going to elect a leader who will keep us moving forward or one who will send us back. The ideas that Hillary has brought to the table From her plans to make college more affordable, to her defense of voting rights, to her call for reforms to our broken criminal justice system, will make our country a better place, not only for my generation, but also for the next. And that is the mark of true leadership. My family's history has taught me that there are certain fights that are too important to sit out. So I hope you'll join me in getting involved today. Spend a Saturday morning talking to your friends and neighbors, or spend one night a week making phone calls. It's kind of fun. Whatever it takes to make sure that Hillary Clinton steps into the Oval Office on January 20th, 2017 as the 45th president and the first woman president of the United States. If you have any questions at all about how you can be a part of the Hillary for New Hampshire campaign to make sure that Hillary is our Democratic nominee, I would love to answer them. Thanks for your time, and now I'd like to introduce the Hillary for New Hampshire organizer for this area, Ross Svensson.
Good evening. My name is Ross Svensson. I'm the organizer here in the Upper Valley for Hillary for New Hampshire. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening to see a great American president introduce our next president, Hillary Clinton. I've had the privilege of working on this campaign in the Upper Valley since July. And in that time, I've gotten to know the people here, the businessmen and women, the students, the teachers, the numerous healthcare professionals, and the families that make this place home. I'm honored to be a part of this historic campaign, and even more so to be working here in the Upper Valley, where the community has so graciously welcomed me. My journey to the Upper Valley, working for Hillary Clinton, began when I was just a kid. Growing up, I thought my mom had the coolest job in the world. She worked as a securities fraud investigator. As she explained it at the time, she helped make sure bad people didn't take advantage of hardworking families. Families trying to save and invest their money on something called the stock market. I understand this all a lot better now. Watching my mom do this kind of work instilled in me a deep belief in fairness and the need to advocate for those who don't always have a voice. This set of values influenced how I eventually felt about politics, whether considering inequities in our nation's education system or our voting rights laws. And this set of values is why I'm such a fervent believer in Hillary Clinton. From her days as a lawyer with the Children's Defense Fund to her work expanding health care for children, Hillary Clinton has stood up for those who needed an advocate, and she sought to create a more fair and a more equal America. Hillary Clinton is the champion that American families deserve in our next president. But to elect Hillary Clinton in 2016, the values she stands for, we need your help. She needs your help. On your way out, there are going to be volunteers with clipboards. Talk to one of them before you leave. They're going to be able to fill you in on all the opportunities that we have here in the Upper Valley. We have 27 days left in this primary campaign. 27 days. In an election as important and competitive as the New Hampshire primary, you all have incredible power as one voice, one voter, and one volunteer. You sharing your personal story of why you're supporting Hillary Clinton on the phones and on the doors with your friends and neighbors will make the difference in this election. No question about it. And I do these campaigns because they're fun. You're going to have a great time doing this, I promise you. This campaign is working hard to earn every single vote and every single volunteer, and we hope you'll join us to make history here in the Granite State. Thank you all for being here today, and I look forward to working with all of you to win this election.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator David Pierce and President Bill Clinton.
Well, I'm so glad to be here today to introduce President Clinton. so that he can talk to us about Hillary and about wherever Hillary goes, something good happens. And something good will happen when we all get out there to work to make her the 45th President of the United States. Hillary believes, as I do, that we need a president who works every day to make sure everyone gets a fair shot, everyone does his or her fair share, and everybody plays by the same rules. And that's why I'm supporting her. I'm supporting her because she's a fighter. More than anyone else, she has what it takes to get the job done for people like you and me and our families. Hillary is the one candidate out there who has shown she can and will stand up to the Republicans and make a difference for working families. We've come so far, we've come too far in the last 7 years with President Obama to let a Republican administration take it all away. Hillary Clinton has the right leadership skills needed to tackle the complex challenges around the world and here at home. And we need a leader who is ready to lead on day one. And Hillary Clinton is that candidate. But beyond that, she has all the right priorities. She knows that there are some fights that she just can't back down from, like facing down the gun lobby, so we can achieve sensible gun safety legislation that will keep our homes, our schools, our movie theaters, and our places of worship safe. I've worked hard in the state Senate to turn back the Republicans and the NRA's dangerous policies, and Hillary Clinton will do that for us in Washington. So that's why I'm going to do everything I can between now and February 9th to ensure that she wins the Democratic nomination, and I hope you'll join me. But with that, I would like to introduce someone who knows how to stand up to Republicans, who knows what it is to oversee an economy that created, 22 million new jobs, the lowest unemployment rate in 30 years, and who turned a Republican budget deficit into a surplus. But really, this man really does need no introduction for me. So I'm proud to be here standing today with Hillary's husband, President Bill Clinton.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you, Senator Pierce, and thank you all for waiting for me. I've been in Keene and in Claremont, and I've got my standard winter nosebleed. You'll have to forgive me. President Hamlin, Mrs. Hamlin, I'm delighted to be here. I want to thank Scott Demas for the Pledge of Allegiance, Austin Borrell for the pre-program welcome and for his work for Hillary at Dartmouth, Ross Fenson, our field organizer. And I want to acknowledge that the man who advanced this event for me, Michael Basher, is Dartmouth class of 2010. And I thank Representatives Sharon Nordgren and Martha Hennessy for being here and for supporting Hillary. And I'm glad to be back in Dartmouth. I spoke at the commencement here once, and I loved it, and it was raining, and I still shook hands with all the graduates. I didn't get pneumonia, and I had a heck of a good time. I'd like to talk to you a little tonight, since I'm at a university, in kind of a non-argumentative but explanatory way. You're entitled, I suppose, to discount what I say. I always call it the love discount. I met Hillary 45 years ago this March. But I also, I think, should get a little credibility because the 8 years I served are the only period of genuinely shared prosperity America's had in 50 years. President Obama got back the jobs we lost in the Depression, the Great Crash, the recession, kept us from going into recession, saved the automobile industry, made enormous strides in many areas, but after the Republicans won the House in 2010, he couldn't put the rest of his economic plan into place. So what I'd like to do is to talk about what I think is the interesting back and forth going on today within our country, within our party, and in the Republican Party. What the president said last night in the State of the Union, I don't know how many of you saw it, but it's absolutely right. He said, we're the best positioned large country in the world for the future. Our economy is growing faster than any other large country. We created 15 million jobs, or 14 million in the last 5 years. A very rapid pace. We are well positioned, but we have to embrace change instead of run away from it. We live in a world that is interdependent, where borders look more like nets than walls. And in that kind of world, good and bad things happen. If you were troubled, as I know you were, by what happened in Paris and that awful tragedy in San Bernardino, you know that the battle we're fighting is basically in that the heads of more than 1 billion people. Over the social media and in everyday life. We have some choices to make. We should be hopeful because of the good things the president talked about last night. But hope is also tempered by a fair amount of anxiety, because 84% of the American people are still making, after inflation, the same or less than they were on the day of the financial crash. Half of the American people, after inflation, are making less than they were the last day I was president, 15 years ago. So, if we want hope to triumph, we have to alleviate anxiety. A lot of people are justifiably angry about those who caused the crash. It was actually caused by financial institutions of all sizes who took on too much risk without enough money to back it up. That was the failure of the SEC. President Bush appointed an SEC commissioner who had his picture taken with a chainsaw in the financial regulations. And the failure of the bank regulators. Interestingly enough, no bank that was a combined investment and commercial bank failed. The first two to fail were investment banks, Lehman Brothers and Bear Stearns. And then the big insurance giants, AIG. And then a slew of banks that just overinvested in bad mortgages. But we got to talk about how to put it back together again, how to have broad-based prosperity again. When all this inequality really got off the ground was in the trickle-down era beginning in 1981 when President Reagan became president. It worked pretty well for him because never before in our history have we run big government deficits in peacetime without a recession, ever. So he had a lot of seed corn he could feed on. And in the Reagan years, we had 15.8 million new jobs, and we tripled the debt. Then came the first Bush term, where we increased the debt another 150% and had almost no new jobs, and incomes dropped. Then, when the Supreme Court refused to let us count the votes in Florida, President Bush, George W. Bush got in, and it was the first time we ever had trickle-down economics with a Republican president and a compliant Congress. So we doubled the debt again, created almost no jobs, and incomes went down. Before the crash, all the growth of this economy was in housing, consumer spending, and finance. With housing, as we found, there's a limit to how many mortgages you can write to people who can't pay them. In consumer spending, even though in a healthy economy we get about 2/3 of our GDP from consumer spending, there's a limit to how many credit cards can be maxed out and how much people can pay. That leaves all the money pooling at the top. And when all the money pools at the top and nobody wants to invest, they speculate. And that's what happened. The mortgage drag, the debt drag, and the speculation caused the economy to implode. And the administration has been busily trying to put it back together. So the first question in this election is, what economic policy is most likely to return us to broad-based prosperity? The second question of the election is, what social policies are more likely to bring us together when it looks like every day we're breaking up into communities of resentment. If you saw the movies, or the films, excuse me, of the shootings in Chicago and by the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles, you understand why the Black Lives Matter movement had some juice. If you saw the riots in Baltimore and in Ferguson, what happened in New York when that poor obese man lost his life for selling 3 illegal cigarettes in the street. We can't have that. But there's reason for hope. When all these things were going on, there was a tiny article in the paper. That's a great thing about being retired. I spend 2 hours a day studying what's going on. So I found this tiny article in the paper that a person of color, I can't remember whether it was an African American or Hispanic, was killed by a police officer in Los Angeles. And there was never another article. No demonstration, no riot, no complaint. Why? Because after the Rodney King shooting and all the trouble in '92, the Los Angeles Police Department established community councils in every neighborhood. Whenever someone is hurt, the police meet with the neighborhood leaders and the victims' families, and everybody wants to come, and they agree first on what happened. And then they try to agree on what to do about it. And whether the killing was justified or not. All of that. So there was no riot, no demonstration. We have to do that again. If you look at how heroically the police performed in San Bernardino, you see what can happen when it works the way it should. I also think we have to fight the tendency to demonize people of any particular ethnic group or religion. About 4 days after the San Bernardino massacre, I was reading the New York Daily News, and there was a little article in the news, not in any other newspaper. And I noticed there was a picture of a counter, looked like a countertop with a bullet hole in it, so I read the article. Here's the story. 2 robbers came into one of these convenience stores where you just pick up stuff in the middle of New York, in the middle of the day. They both had pistols. One of them stood and faced the door. One of them faced the guy behind the cash register, pointed a gun at him and told him to empty the register and give him the money. The man behind the register was a Yemeni immigrant who's been here since 2002. All the time trying to bring his wife and 4 children with him. All the time spending what money he could earn back home. He's terrified. He opens the cash register. He gets the money in his hand. He looks at the money, looks at them and says, you know, I've only had this job for a year. This is not my money. And it's certainly not yours. And he reaches out and slaps the gun hand of the guy pointing the gun at him. The gun goes off and barely misses him and buries the bullet I saw in the picture in the counter. Thank God the robbers were not fools. They realized they had just shot a gun in downtown New York in broad daylight. So they ran away. He immediately went next door, borrowed the phone, called the police, went back, put the money up, waited for the police. He made his report. By then his boss had showed up and he was so grateful to him that he gave him the afternoon off. He went home to his little apartment and he pulled out his prayer rug and he got down on his knees and he thanked his God for saving his life and prayed that finally his children, now 15, 17, 19, and 21, and his wife would be able to join him in America. He is far more representative of Muslims in America than those people in San Bernardino. My belief is there are a few clear issues in this election. How can we best restore broad-based prosperity? How can we deal with our major social challenges so we bring the country back together? How can we preserve our political system and our basic freedoms in the face of all this dark money being spent in campaigns anonymously, and repeated efforts to restrict voting rights. And how can we stop the Republicans from repealing everything President Obama has done? They voted again last week to repeal the health care law. That's the 55th time they still haven't offered a substitute. They want to repeal his climate change orders. They want to repeal his gun safety measures. I was just in Claremont, and a woman who survived a gunshot gave me this list, this pictures, huge numbers of pictures of people who did not survive and people who did but were gravely injured. What he offered didn't amount to what we need, which is universal background checks that include online sales, which didn't exist when I signed the Brady Bill the first time, and gun show sales, and enough waiting period so that mental health records can genuinely be checked. The NRA says they want more mental health spent, but we don't have a centralized set of records in this country, and sometimes you can't find in 3 days whether somebody, like the Virginia Tech shooter, who was clearly treated for mental health problems, was not in a centralized record base. They needed more than 3 days to check. I come from a state where half the people have hunting and fishing licenses, where a lot of school districts closed when I was governor on the first day of deer season because nobody would have been there anyway. I get it. I get hunting and sports shooting and people who live a long way from ready law enforcement wanting a gun in their home for safety. I get all that. This has nothing to do with that. What this is a strategy by the NRA that recognizes that actually a slightly smaller percentage of gun owners, of homeowners, own guns. Fewer households as a percentage of our population. So in order for them to make their market targets, they have to keep the rest of the gun owners in a constant frenzy that somebody is coming to get their guns, so that the same homes buy more and more and more and more guns. And on the streets of New York, where we have pretty good gun laws, increasingly, the guns that are involved in crimes were those that make their way up from Virginia, which used to have a one handgun a month policy, but when they abandoned it, it became a ready pipeline. All we need is to do something sensible. I saw President Obama's town hall meeting, I don't know if you did, and that sheriff from Arizona that wants everybody to have an open carry, basically said, we messed this up so bad you can't fix it. He said, oh, there's so many guns, anybody can get it. That's not true. After I signed the Brady Bill, 700,000 felons, fugitives, and stalkers did not get guns who tried to get it. Will it save every life? No. Will it save some? You bet. We don't abandon the speed limits or the seatbelt laws or the child restraint seats because some people still die in car wrecks every year, and far fewer died than did when I was your age. So these things are important. We can't let these gains be reversed. So I'll start with the politics. The most important thing to remember is the next President of the United States will get between 1 and 3 appointments to the United States Supreme Court. And we dare not allow somebody in there after their outrageous voting rights decision, the outrageous decision in Citizens United, and they have now agreed to hear a case about whether they should dilute the one person, one vote rule, which has been the law in this country since 1964. So as to give even more advantages to the party of the 5 Republican judges that normally vote that way. It's breathtaking. The stakes are high. So I'm for Hillary for the following reasons. I think she's got the best economic policy. Let's talk about that. I think her policy is more likely to produce more investment, more jobs, more businesses, and rising incomes. She wants to raise the minimum wage and also give big incentives to companies to engage in profit sharing. If you look at the mass market company, or the market basket company, if you look at Nucor Steel, a non-union company, where they have weekly bonuses, supplements for every child, every spouse, and every worker to go to college. A no layoff policy. Companies that treat their workers well are more profitable over the long run. This is important. I think that it's really important to make it possible for more women to enter the workforce. It would add to the growth of the country. Even though the unemployment rate is low and many jobs have been created, we've had enough population growth so that the workforce participation rate is still about 4% lower than it was when I was president. We can do something about that. How? When I left office, we were 7th in the world in the percentage of women in the workforce. Even though we were one of only 7 countries without paid leave. We can't do that any longer because we are now not in the top 20. Let me say that again for all of you. We are not in the top 20 in the world in the percentage of our women in the workforce. Why? Because we didn't pass equal pay, paid leave, and affordable child care. And she will do that. It's a moral strategy, but it's an economic strategy. And it will dramatically improve. We have to make college more affordable. The public colleges of America used to be the last refuge of people who wanted a good education and didn't have any money. But in the last 15 years, they've been starved. First, because of the crash, with not enough revenues, and many states under court orders not to undermine equality of spending in public schools, they've been starved. Then many of the Republican governors, there are 30 of them now, have cut taxes at the expense of college education and raised the prices. California once had the finest network of public higher education in the history of the world, and it is under enormous stresses because of this, which is why the governor there raised revenues and tried to save it. Hillary thinks we've got to let people refinance their loans. We've got to be able to consolidate all loans from all sources and limit repayment to a fixed percentage of a graduate's income. This is a big deal. I had one of those income contingent loans. And the first group that ever happened, when Hillary and I finished law school, and our class owed the money back, and we all agreed to pay, everybody was smaller then, we all agreed to pay 0.6% or something of our income until the class's loan was paid off. The class's loan was paid off early. We need to have shared responsibilities along with shared opportunities. This is crazy. I met a guy the other day whose assistant lived in New York City. Her after-tax income was $70,000. That's a pretty good amount of money, even in New York, except that her monthly college loan payment for her bachelor's and master's degree was $2,900 a month. You do the math, it's almost half of her income. We got to stop that. And then she wants to spend as much money as we can to alleviate the burden on middle class and lower income families. She doesn't favor free tuition for people in our income group. I was proud that I could afford to pay for my daughter to go to Stanford, and I thought we should contribute to the university. But this is a big deal. If we start losing ground in college graduates, we're in trouble. And we need to support community colleges and skills training programs. We've got to do that. Today, in any given day, there are about 3 million jobs being advertised in America. And for most of the last 8 years, those jobs have been filled at a much slower rate than was normal. In no small measure, because employers were having trouble finding people who had the specific skill set they needed. That will also make a difference. Finally, we've got to do something for the areas that were left out and left behind. As you know, I just came from Claremont, and we spoke in this beautiful, beautiful building. And the city manager of Claremont, who's endorsed Hillary, said, when I came here, this building was nothing but broken windows and pigeons. And it's beautiful now because of something called the New Markets Tax Credit, which was the last big bill President Clinton signed. We rebuilt Claremont with it. The Republican Congress allowed that bill to lapse last year. Coal country needs that bill. West Virginia has, I think, the second worst economy in America today and the highest rate of opiate and heroin addiction of any state in America. And those two things are related because everybody goes through tough times in life, but if you can get up every morning and look in the mirror and believe you can make today better than yesterday, you can endure nearly anything. But if you have to get up every morning and look in the mirror and say, today's going to be just like yesterday, and so is every tomorrow, you're beat before you start. We have got to give incentives for people to invest. I strongly support the President's climate change relief. And we've been losing coal jobs for 100 years. A lot of people don't know that. Coal employment peaked in 1920. Coal production peaked in 1950. Thousands of jobs were lost when George W. Bush, who championed the coal industry, was president because people wanted to use natural gas instead. It was cheaper and not as harmful to the environment. But we have got to give those people a chance to start again. When I ran for president the first time, New Hampshire had the worst economy in America. Highest rate of bank failures, highest rate of home foreclosures. And I said that to the rest of the country. I talked about you when I was there. We got to go up and down together. So that's important. Finally, we need to figure out a way to even strengthen the Dodd-Frank financial legislation and still make it more flexible at the bottom so community banks can make small business loans, can help new entrepreneurs starting out. Most of the jobs we got when I was president, 22.7 million, were with smaller businesses. And now we find two things. The Dodd-Frank bill does not adequately invest what is the new threat, shadow banking. Non-banks making the same kinds of mistakes that were made that caused the Great Crash. Hillary would cover them, and it's very important. She would keep the high standards on the big banks, allow the breakup of any banks, not just those that are investment banks and commercial banks, but solely investment banks or solely commercial banks, if they insist on making risky speculation their preferred choice instead of reinvestment in the American economy. But she would make it easier to loan money to the farmer if his or her John Deere tractor broke down at planting time. Or to some young person with a good idea to start a new business. You can't run an economy if the transaction costs for processing an $80,000 loan are the same as the transaction costs for processing an $80 million loan. A lot of bankers are turning them down now, and we are full of good ideas. People are bursting with good ideas. And you don't want to force everybody, especially with small needs in the beginning, to go to a venture capitalist where they have to give up part of their company to get any money. This is a very important thing. So we need tough at the top with flexibility in making these small business loans. Now, who's got the best plan? All the plans have been reviewed by Paul Krugman, the Nobel Prize winning economist for the New York Times, by Barney Frank, who wrote the Dodd-Frank bill, by Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio, the populist senator from Ohio, who now is the ranking Democrat on the committee with jurisdiction over all this. They all three said Hillary's plan was the best. The most comprehensive, the most effective, the most likely to prevent a future meltdown, and to promote more economic growth. So did two New York hedge fund managers. They set up super PACs against one Democrat, Hillary. Those guys didn't get rich by being stupid. They know what they're doing. She went in 2007, before anybody else was talking about it, to Wall Street and said, you're messing up on this mortgage deal. You're going to collapse the economy and ruin the housing market. You need to stop. But there was no regulator standing in the way. So I think she's got the best economic plan. Who's got the best social policies? This is the work of her life. The number one problem in America today is the opiate and heroin addiction. It has been so pervasive in small town and rural America that for the first time since the 1800s, the life expectancy of middle-aged, non-college educated white Americans is going down. The life expectancy of African Americans is holding steady. It's continuing to rise for Hispanic Americans. What happens is more white Americans get hooked on the opiates, and then the street value of heroin, now grown in Mexico with the poppies harvested by preteens in the Sierra Madre, is cheaper than the pills. It is a crisis, but an opportunity, because it is happening to everyone, Democrats and Republicans, cities and rural areas. We have a chance to do this together. The one thing that the Republicans have said that I agree with, and it's literally almost the only thing I've said. I listen to all these debates, and I think I'm living in a parallel universe. But they have said that this is primarily a public health problem. It must be addressed as a public health problem. If a pharmacist is writing bum prescriptions, okay, charge him. If a doctor is trying to get rich by giving people prescriptions he's got no business writing, charge him. But the people who are suffering, it's a public health problem. And to all the college students here, I just want to say one thing. First, you have a good governor and a good leadership team because they've got Narcan, the miracle drug that stops you from dying if you're about to suffer an overdose, in wide use. It's just been approved. I know a lot about this because Hillary and I have 3 friends, including a Kosovar Albanian immigrant who lives across the street from us, one of my closest friends in the world, an Indian immigrant who came here and did well, whose son in the George Washington University MBA law program was working for Hillary at the time, and one of our closest friends from Yale, whose daughter spoke 4 languages, translated a novel from French into Spanish, and in addition to being fluent, was conversant in 5 more languages. Those 3 kids died because they didn't understand the basic biochemistry that if you have 3 or 4 beers or 3 or 4 glasses of wine and you try to get a high by popping an OxyContin, if you fall asleep, it deadens the part of your brain that tells your body to breathe. Those 3 young people, so full of promise, never woke up. All in their 30s, all completely ignorant. So my Indian friend called me one day and he said, and his son was a magnificent person. He said, "You can't let my boy die in vain. I'll give you $200,000 a year to figure out something to do about this." So we made a partnership with one of the drug manufacturers to put naloxone, what you call Narcan, into a spray form, a nasal spray. Because it's a lot easier than injections, obviously, and easier to distribute. The FDA approved it in record time. We also saved $40 a dose, a life-saving dose. And we need this on every campus, in every dorm, in every first responder. But it's just the beginning. In the end, we got to get out of this. People have to understand this is a self-inflicted wound that we have to beat. That brings me to the next social problem. We do not have enough treatment and mental health infrastructure to deal with the problems. Because a lot of the true addicts, as I just described, are people with desperate lives in small town and rural America. It's not out there, the infrastructure. We can all say pretty speeches about that. Hillary's offered a $10 billion plan to deal with it, and this is one we have an honest chance to pass with an overwhelming bipartisan majority, and we should seize that chance because it can literally derail America's progress. And I can tell you from 3 personal experiences, it is an unimaginable pain to see that kind of human potential wasted. We also need to give more help to caregivers whose families suffer at the top end of the age bracket from Alzheimer's, or at the bottom end with children with autism who require more care. We can deal with all this, and we have to do it together. And it will affect the way we do with the economy. Finally, we need some changes in the healthcare law. We got to make the healthcare exchanges work better. But we should be very careful, knowing the Republicans are still determined to derail it. Last year, the rate spiked because most of the people who signed up for the exchanges were older people and they cost more money. This year, of the first 2.5 million people who enrolled, most were younger people. So the rates will moderate again. We've already got over 90% insured for the first time. If all the states take the Medicaid expansion, we'll be at 95. It took the states, believe it or not, 20 years until the last state, Arizona, took Medicare. 20 years. I took Medicaid, I mean, because that required a state match and you couldn't be doing it. We'll get there quicker than that. Then it'll be a simple matter to close the last 5%. But we've got to protect it, and we've got to fix the small business exchanges so that the market works. We've got to stop paying so much for drugs. We pay so much more for drugs than countries with per capita incomes comparable to ours because we absorb all the marketing as well as the research costs. The government should bargain for a better deal for the American people. And finally, we need to keep changing the payment systems. People who are in pay-for-performance systems, as well, instead of pay-for-procedures, pay less, have lower error rates, and better results. We can do this, and that's what she wants to do. On national security policy, Hillary believes that it's a matter of defense, diplomacy, and development, and making more friends and fewer enemies. No one can promise you that no bad thing will ever happen. But I can tell you a lot of improvements have been made. We can count the bad incidents. The Boston Marathon bomber, the Fort Hood military officer, the tragedy in San Bernardino. Since 9/11, 45 Americans have died in terrorist incidents inspired by foreigners. Today and every day, 30 Americans die of gun injuries that are not suicide. So we stop a lot, but we can do better. Hillary's goal is to stop big bad things from happening and make more good things happen. I wish all of you could have been in Claremont with me because her organizer there is a young Turkish American who said, I decided to support her in 2010 because I was in Iraq as a civilian worker, and then in Afghanistan, and then in Ethiopia, and then in the newest country in the world, South Sudan. And everywhere I could see America making good things happen, trying to help people lift their hopes and fears under her direction. That's what we got to do. She's way the best qualified to do that. And finally, she's the best qualified because she's the best change maker I ever knew in public and private life. It's one thing to talk about this stuff and quite another to do. So I'll tell you a couple of stories you may not know. When she got out of law school, women were in a distinct minority. She graduated from Yale. She could have gone anywhere, taken the big bucks. She went to work for the Children's Defense Fund. And the first job she had was going to Alabama because there were all these academies being established that were basically just a way of segregating the schools and maintaining all white schools, but they were claiming tax exemptions. So the Children's Defense Fund wanted to disprove their eligibility for tax exemptions. She went to North Alabama and pretended to be a mother moving to town. And she said, after she did the interview, she said, I just want to know if my kid's going to go to an all-white school or not. And she was assured that they were, and she had them. That was a pretty gutsy thing to do in the early 70s in Dothan, Alabama. Then she went to South Carolina to find out why there were so many African American kids, 13, 14, 15 years old, being kept for years in adult prisons. And she went back, and the Children's Defense Fund made a report on that, and they changed that too. Both those things changed. She just makes something good happen. Then she came home to Arkansas with me, and we never had a legal services program at the law school. So a whole big part of our state with a lot of poor people, if they got in trouble with the law, a judge assigned a lawyer. It was a bad system. If the lawyer had no business, it meant he wasn't any good. If the lawyer did have a lot of business, it meant that the poor person came last after the paying folks. But the judge liked the system. He was an old hidebound guy, and I apologize to all the young people for even using these terms, but Hillary said, I'm going to do something about this. So she put together a legal services proposal, and she had to get the judge to approve it. She called me one day and she said, you got to go to court with me. I said, why? She said, because the judge doesn't like this, and he does like you, so I want you to introduce me to him. So I did, I introduced him to him, and I sat down, and he said, is there any business come before the court? And Hillary stood up and said, what you want to do? And that guy looked over the bench, and he said, I don't like legal aid. And the truth is, I don't like lady lawyers very much. People actually said stuff like that. 6 months later, he changed his mind about both. President Carter, because she did a good job with good lawyers, good cases, the ones who should get off did, and the ones who shouldn't have couldn't have their convictions overturned for having bad lawyers. President Carter put on the National Board of the Legal Services Corporation. She was elected the chair at 29 years old. Still the youngest person ever to hold that job. She hadn't been elected to anything. And I've become governor. She comes in one day just jumping up and down happy. She said, you know, I've been so worried. We had 6 of the 20 poorest counties in America. 3 were predominantly African American in the Mississippi Delta. 3 were in our Appalachian in the Ozark Mountains. She said, Bill, all these people are having babies and they're starting to school. They can't read, they can't speak very well. Their parents are virtually illiterate. But I found a program in Israel that addresses it for immigrants coming there who don't speak Hebrew or English. It's called HIPPY, the Home Instruction Program for Preschool Youngsters. I think it would help here. I said, well, how are we going to do that? She said, oh, I've done it. I called the woman who created it. She'll be here in 10 days. Next thing I know, she's dragging me around to these little hippie graduations. Next thing I know, we got it in 27 states with the biggest program still in Arkansas. Now, keep in mind, this was before kindergarten. This was before pre-kindergarten. This was before there were any standards with education component for child care. Just because she did that, thousands of low-income kids started school ready to learn and had totally different lives. They don't have a clue she had anything to do with her life, and she didn't care. She just made something good happen. She hadn't been elected to anything. Then the court said our schools were unequally funded, and I welcomed it because it gave me an excuse to raise standards and raise taxes to pay for them and to raise teacher pay. Because the national experts said we had the worst school system in America. I put her in charge of the standards committee. She put it together, had hearings in every county, made all the people who didn't want to change mad, presented it to the legislature, they adopted it, we implemented it. It enabled me to come here to New Hampshire, running for president, and say, you know, 9 years ago, we had an expert say we had the worst schools in America. This year, the same exact guy said the 2 most improved states in America were Arkansas and South Carolina. She did that too. She never been elected to anything. Then I get to be president. We tried and failed to pass health care reform then because we didn't have 60 votes in the Senate. As the president did, it passed by 1 vote, 60 votes in the Senate. So she didn't give up. She worked with Senator Kennedy and came up with the idea of having a children's health insurance program. They put it into the balanced budget bill so that 75% of the Republicans voted for it. By the time I left office, 5 million kids had insurance. Today, 12 million kids are insured under that program. It's a critical component of what we call Obamacare. Then one day she came in skipping again. She did that twice, once on the hippie program, and then she did it again. Walked in my office, she said, I found it. I said, what? She said, I found the human streak in Tom DeLay. Tom DeLay, for those of you too young to remember him, was the Republican leader in the pre-Tea Party Congress. And it's fair to say that of all the members of the Republican caucus, he ranked number one in disliking me and everything I stood for. I said, well, do tell what the human strength is. She said, he's an adopted parent, Bill, and he loves his children. And it's real. And at the time, we had all these foster kids, and no one wanted to adopt them unless they could get them as infants. So the older they got, the less likely it was they would be adopted. And we had them aging out of foster care, no college to go to, no support for job training, no, how are they going to live? Nothing. So she and Tom DeLay wrote a bill. We had a bill signing in the White House. He showed up, I bragged on it. I'd do it again if he walked in. Because by the time I left office, we'd increased adoptions by 65% from foster care into permanent homes. She changed lives for all these people. They probably have no idea if she did it. She just always made something good happen. Then, when I left the White House, she became a senator of New York. She got George W. Bush to promise $20 billion from New York City to rebuild after 9/11. Not just the buildings, but the lives of the people who had been injured. One woman she followed for years had to do 12 plastic surgeries just so she could function again. And her fiance stayed with her every step of the way. They married, they made a good life. She got John McCain to go with her, with Republican senators, to see the impacts of global warming in the northernmost settlement on Earth, Svalbard, an island north of Norway, and Point Barrow, Alaska, the northernmost American city, where the Eskimos wept, telling them their way of life was coming to an end because of climate change, and their villages were sinking into the mud. She worked with Lindsey Graham, who briefly ran for president to make sure that National Guard people who fought in Iraq or Afghanistan got the same health care benefits as others. She worked with other Republicans to provide adequate protective material to deal with traumatic brain injuries, post-traumatic stress disorder. I'll never forget, this handsome young military guy came up to me one day when I was in the Congress, either in the Senate or the House Office building, testifying on health care issues. And he said, I just think you ought to know that at the Pentagon, we believe your wife knows more about our business than any member of the Congress in either house and either party, and cares more about the burdens on military families of all these rapid redeployments. I thought you'd like to know that. She was always making something good happen. Long Island farmers will go to Iowa and tell people when they knock on doors that they're Republicans, but they're there because she's the only person who ever did anything for them. She was always finding common ground. When she became Secretary of State, she got the Iran sanctions package to be approved by China and Russia. Now, I didn't think she could do that. That's the only reason it worked. She was responsible for passing the only thing that survives from our attempt to have a better relationship with President Putin and Russia, the New START Treaty. Reduces the danger of nuclear war. Her people put the deal together, she sold it, then she had to pass it in the Senate. A Republican Senate got 67 votes. Well, the Democratic Senate by like 3 votes or something. And it's still being honored. She's always doing stuff like that. And she didn't forget about smart power. She called me one day and she said, President Bush's finest achievement, PEPFAR, money for AIDS, TB, and malaria around the world. She said, you know, we're only saving 1.7 million lives a year with this money. It's a lot of money. She said, how much do the drugs that you in our foundation, what do they cost? And I told her. She talked to her director of PEPFAR, who opened the third AIDS clinic in the world in San Francisco, they immediately went to 100% but FDA approved generic drugs. And when she left office, for no more money to you, I bet you nobody in this audience knew this, instead of 1.7 million lives, we were saving 5.1 million lives a year. Now, you don't know any of those 3.4 million people, but I'll guarantee you, in the countries where they live, largely in Africa, they know, their governments know, and they like it. Last summer I was on Long Island, and a man came up to me and said, "You don't know me, I wasn't in government when you were. But when Hillary was Secretary of State, I was the British Foreign Secretary for Northern Ireland. And you worked so hard for the peace in Northern Ireland, and it was on the rocks in 2010. We were stymied. Nobody would talk to anybody else. We were in danger of losing the peace. I could just see all this awful violence, everything, all of that. And in desperation, I called Hillary. And I said, I know you have no responsibility for this, but we're in trouble. And the only people they'll listen to are you and your husband, and you're in office. I want you to fix it." He said, "I have no idea what you did or who she talked to. But 36 hours later, they were all acting like it never happened. Everybody was friends again, everything was going on, and we went on and dealt with the issues." He said, "She is the only person in the world who could have done that. And I think you ought to know it. And I would like to do something for her." And believe me, he said, "I'm not the only one." Now, that's all I can tell you. Everything she ever touched, she made better. And if you want inclusive economics, inclusive social policies, and an inclusive future, you got to get somebody who knows how to find common ground and who knows how to stand their ground. She proved in that 11-hour Benghazi hearing that she could stand her ground. I doubt that there's another figure in public life who could have done that. So it just depends on what you want. We know what the Republicans want. They're smart. That's why they've been trashing her for a year. They have their 3Ds, like defense, diplomacy, and development. Theirs are distract, divide, and demonize. And they're smart. They don't want to run against her, so they've been dumping on her, trying to get us to do their work for them. And you just have to decide. But it depends on how you keep score. In our family, we keep score, and we raise our daughter to keep score in a very simple fashion. Are people better off when you quit than when you started? The children have a brighter future. And are things coming together instead of being torn apart? If you can answer that, yes. Everything else is background music. If you will work and talk to people about the points I've made tonight and see everybody you can in New Hampshire, you will be able, at the end of her service, to scream a resounding yes to those 3 questions. She is the best qualified person for this moment in history I've ever seen. And I've studied all my predecessors, the ones who succeeded and the ones who failed. A couple were dumb, but few. A couple tolerated corruption too much, but few. A couple didn't work hard enough, but few. The average person who gets elected president is intelligent, hardworking, and honestly tries to do what they say they're going to do when they get there. But there's a big difference in who can do and who can't. So it's important to find somebody with the right temperament, the right experience, the right gifts to actually do, because we need a grown-up in the room. If you listen to all that stuff, if you really be saying, you need a grown-up in there. Like I said, you're entitled to give all these remarks the love discount if you want. But everything I have told you, I believe with all my heart. New Hampshire's been good to my family. We love it. Northern New Hampshire has been especially good to our family, and we love it. But mostly, I want you to do what's best for you. Most of the people in this audience have more tomorrows than yesterdays. Those of us who have more yesterdays than tomorrows, believe it or not, spend most of our time thinking about the future. And I believe it would be a gift that would keep on giving, because she made everything she ever touched better. Thank you very much.
Let's get it started in here. And the bass keeps running, running, and 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 running, running.
In this context, there's no disrespect. Soaring above my rhyme, you break your necks. We get 5 minutes for us to disconnect. Roll wall, intellect, elect, win. So losing inhibition, follow your intuition. 3 minutes of a breakaway from tradition. And women be down, good as full of winner. You and them believe how we wow people out. Turn it till it's burning out, turn it till it's turning out. Back to the northwest, east, south.
Everybody, everybody, let's get into it. Let's get it stupid. Let's get it started. 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 Lose control of body and soul. Don't move too fast, people. Just take it slow. Don't get ahead. Just jump into it. Y'all hear about it? The air to do it. Get started. Get stupid. Don't move too fast, people. We'll walk you through it step by step, like an infant new kid, inch by inch with a new solution. Transmit hits with no delusion. The fear's irresistible, and that's how we move it. Everybody, everybody, let's get into it. Let's get it stupid. Let's get it started. 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 And the bass keeps running, running, and running, running, and running, running, and running. Let's just get to talking in here. 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 Let's get started 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 in here. Yeah, 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 bow.
Hey everybody, my name is Austin Brown, and I'm a student volunteer for Hillary here at Dartmouth. I want to take a few moments to tell you all about why I support this candidate, and why I believe it is so incredibly important for you all to get involved in this election. I come from a family that understands the gravity of civic engagement. 51 years ago, the Ku Klux Klan murdered my father's cousin, Andy, at the age of 20. Andy had traveled to rural Mississippi as a young college student, joining hundreds of volunteers in rural Mississippi to register African Americans to vote, during a time when our democracy was not so democratic. I stand with Hillary because she has been a voice for those who need a champion throughout her 30 years in public service. When facing big fights on the local, national, and global stage, Hillary does not stand down. Instead, she has the tenacity and determination to stand up for what's right and deliver results.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Senator David Pierce and President Bill Clinton.
so glad to be here today to introduce President Clinton so that he can talk to us about Hillary and about wherever Hillary goes, something good happens. And something good will happen when we all get out there to work to make her the 45th President of the United States. Hillary believes, as I do, that we need a president who works every day to make sure everyone gets a fair shot, everyone does his or her fair share, and everybody plays by the same rules. And that's why I'm supporting her. I'm supporting her because she's a fighter. More than anyone else, she has what it takes to get the job done for people like you and me and our families. Hillary is the one candidate out there who has shown she can and will stand up to the Republicans and make a difference for working families.
I'm glad to be back in Dartmouth. I spoke at the commencement here once, and I loved it, and it was raining, and I still shook hands with all the graduates. I didn't get pneumonia, and I had a heck of a good time. I'd like to talk to you a little tonight, since I'm at a university, in kind of a non-argumentative but explanatory way. You're entitled, I suppose, to discount what I say. I always call it the love discount. I met Hillary 45 years ago this March. But I also, I think, should get a little credibility because the 8 years I served are the only period of genuinely shared prosperity America's had in 50 years.